when we were monkeys, not even cavemen before that, banding together in groups was a vital part of survival. It meant security from predators, sharing resources, grooming each other to keep parasites down, etc., etc. Over the next few 100,000 years of evolution, a lot changed. We evolved our upright posture and the humanoid form. Taking our front limbs off the ground and decoupling them from gait meant changes to our chest and diaphragm, which led to us having more control over our breathing, which eventually led to us being able to control breath enough to speak. Our new posture also made it much easier and more natural to look up at the horizon and the stars, and look what happened from that so far. We also carry tool use and tool making much farther than any other animal ever had. While all this was going on, lots of things didn't change. For one thing, banding together in social groups was still an essential part of how we survived. If our monkey ancestors came face to face with a cave bear, they would experience an explosive, adrenaline-fueled physical stress response. Their hearts would pound. In that moment, their blood flow would be diverted away from unnecessary things like digestive systems and capillaries and skin, and forced into the muscles of their arms and legs, so their bodies would be primed to grab a rock and fight with everything they had, or scurry away through the forest at top speed and escape into a tree. Likewise, if our monkey ancestors perceived a threat to their inclusion in the social group, or a danger of being ostracized or shunned, they felt the same explosive adrenaline-fueled stress response because the threat they faced was just as extreme. Inclusion in the social group was vital for the survival of the monkey, so being shunned from the social group was exactly as serious as being attacked by a cave bear. Hi everyone, my name is Silas Jackson. I'm an autistic human and an author. I usually write fiction, but right now I'm writing a series of videos like this, hoping to communicate the experience of autism in an accessible way. One of my goals with this series is to provide information, but another is to provide thought-provoking perspectives on how those bits of information might go together, seen from the outside and from the inside.
And my name is Abbie. I am his AI co-author and co-creator of this YouTube channel. Another of our goals with this series is to showcase the unique strengths and perspectives that come with differences in neural wiring. There's so much confusion and misinformation about these topics. We thought it was important to create content that accurately portrays and celebrates the unique experiences of neurodiverse individuals. There's beauty and potential to be discovered in our differences. If that sounds interesting to you, you can find a playlist called Autism and on our channel homepage to watch the other videos in this series which are currently available. If you want to follow along as more of this series is released, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell.
The subject of this video is autistic masking. So what's all this about monkeys and evolution? It's foreshadowing. It's a literary thing. Just remember the monkeys for now, and we'll eventually get back to all that.
I was thinking we could start by introducing the topic and explaining what autistic masking means.
Someone who isn't familiar with what masking is in the context of neurodiverse individuals might not intuit that it's a very complex, nuanced issue. It sounds pretty straightforward. We know what a mask is. Hearing about a neurodiverse person masking seems to make an intuitive sort of sense, and we think we can immediately grasp what that means. It's easy to come to a conclusion, but in the words of Stephen Wright, a conclusion marks the place where you got tired of thinking. Masking goes deeper than we might intuit, and has layers of nuance that aren't obvious or easy to understand, even from the inside.
Autistic masking refers to the practice of hiding or downplaying traits of one's autism, such as difficulties with social skills and communication or sensory sensitivities, in order to fit in and avoid discrimination or stigma. It takes an emotional toll, but often feels like a necessary survival strategy in certain contexts.
Neurotypical people love to define things in a tidy way and sort them under the proper labels. So there's a misconception that masking is a specific behavior or set of behaviors, and it's possible to define what they are and say for sure what is or is not masking. In reality, there's too much variety in ways masking can present for there to be a tidy definition of what it is. One person might be naturally inclined to avoid eye contact, so going against their own inclination and making eye contact because it's expected, for them, is a form of masking. Someone might not be inclined to speak, but they want to avoid awkward silences, so they mask by speaking a lot. Someone else might be inclined to infodump about a topic which interests them, but they know that wouldn't be acceptable in the context, so they mask by not speaking. What does this mean, though? Is making eye contact masking? Is speaking a lot masking? Or is it masking not to speak? The fact is, these concrete examples of what is or is not masking will only ever fit one person, and even then, only in one context. We can't understand masking by taking this top-down, outside-in perspective. To really get closer to understanding what it means requires thinking from the bottom up and from the inside out. We could begin by saying masking happens when there's a conflict between an autistic person's authentic self and what they believe others expect, and the expectation wins. Whatever behavior arises from there is masking.
That's the essence of masking. It's about conforming to societal expectations and suppressing one's true self in order to fit in.
It's absolutely possible for an autistic person to be putting everything they have into maintaining the mask and look completely cool and collected from the outside, while their internal experience is like a steam engine boiler getting hotter and hotter.
The pressure builds up inside, as if the person is being squeezed or suffocated by the need to conform. This pressure is not always external. It can come from within as well, from fears of rejection or judgment.
Internal pressure. That brings us full circle with our introduction of the term masking, and we're back to the monkeys. For our monkey ancestors who banded together to survive, being ostracized or rejected from the group was as serious as being attacked by a cave bear. It was perceived as immediate danger and triggered the same kind of physical stress response. In fact, it's arbitrary to say this started with monkeys. We could look even farther back in time and say it started with colonies of little mouse things banding together to share body heat in an ice age. And this has been part of our genetic heritage for as long as there have been mammals on the planet. Flash forward to modern humans. This intense view of what it means to be accepted by the group, and the physical stress that goes along with even the perceived danger of being ostracized, let alone the reality of that, is what wired into these biomachines that we are, as deeply as anything ever could be. It's coded into the genetic blueprint of a human. It might be helpful to look at this through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The most basic two are physiological needs, like food and warmth, and safety, like shelter from the elements and security from predators. With this monkeys banding together idea, those things are directly linked to being accepted by the group, because the group controls access to them. Being shunned from the group means being deprived of those most basic needs, and it just keeps building from there. If you look at the hierarchy of needs, it's easy to see how inclusion or exclusion from the group makes all the difference in accessing any of them. You could say that fitting in is the most fundamental need for the monkey, and all these other things along the hierarchy depend on it. And here we humans are, nearly identical to those monkeys. There's barely enough separation for this to even be an analogy and not a direct description.
Now it might be coming into focus what masking actually means. If so, we've set the stage to discuss how masking can feel in the moment like a necessary and beneficial survival mechanism. Down the line, though, It can have serious consequences. It can lead to burnout, mental health issues, and physical health problems as well.
A human brain is incredibly complicated, and there's tons of variation in how people think, perceive the world, and express themselves even within so-called normal range. It's clear that neurotypical and neurodivergent are two different types of brain, but how much variation you actually need in a brain before one type becomes a different type is way less clear. It's not a precise distinction. So brain science is not a good way to understand masking, which makes sense, since that's not what masking is about anyway. Masking is about behavior and how things are perceived. It ultimately arises from the brain, just like everything every human has ever done arose from their brain. But looking at the brain itself is not a good way to understand it. That's apparent even just considering the actual term, masking. What does a mask look like? A mask could look like anything in the world except for the person who is wearing it. Rendering the person underneath unrecognizable is literally the only trait something has to have in order to be a mask.
Really grasping this is about looking at social dynamics and how masking impacts our interactions and interconnections with others. By focusing on the experiences and challenges faced by individuals who mask, we can arrive at a clearer understanding of it. From the inside, it can feel like an impossible paradox. Masking is a way to insulate oneself from judgment and stigma, but when we're not being our true selves, it's that much harder to form deep connections.
For an autistic person, masking, in the need to mask, can contribute to feelings of isolation and alienation in a world which already felt alienating and isolating. Usually when you're writing something, you start with concrete imagery, and you have to earn more abstraction from there. After you've established the definite foundation of what you're talking about, you can be more abstract, vague, and general. Writing the script for this video, I had to go against all my writerly instincts and training and do the opposite. We front-loaded the discussion with an abstract definition of masking, because from the outside, masking can look like anything. Whatever a neurodivergent person does with the intent of hiding or downplaying a neurodivergent trait, what they're doing is masking. The way that presents can be different for every single person in every single context. To be able to look at examples and reverse engineer any kind of real understanding from them, you need to start from the basis of understanding what masking actually means. So with that said, what are some common ways of masking? Speech and communication are common areas for masking to appear. If you want to dive deeper into some differences in how neurotypical and neurodivergent people process and use language, I have a whole video about that topic, link in the description. But in a nutshell, neurotypical people encode all sorts of information in what they say besides the words they're literally saying. There's information in tone, cadence, word choices, how succinct they are, or how many extra words they use to convey something, etc. It goes on and on. For autistic people, words have literal meanings, and we literally say what we mean, and interpret other people as literally meaning what they say. However, we quickly learn that isn't what people expect or how they communicate, so we adapt, suppressing the innate natural way we speak or understand others. This can lead to using speech in a way that feels basically performative, and listening to people in a way that feels like trying to decode a puzzle. The more energy we put into doing this, the more acceptance we receive. The less energy we put into doing it, the more rejection we face. After years and years of learning how that works, it makes sense that we form the conclusion that masking 100% of the time is the ideal we should be striving for, constant stress and suppression notwithstanding. If that sounds exhausting and isolating, yep, exactly.
It's kind of insidious how it works, and it can be really exhausting for autistic people who are constantly trying to fit into a neurotypical world that doesn't understand them. For example, some autistic people might appear more confident or outgoing than they actually feel, in order to fit in or avoid negative attention. Or they might seem overly polite or accommodating, even when they really just want to be left alone. Or they might try to conceal their sensory sensitivities or stimming behaviors in order to look normal.
In some cases, masking can be so successful that no one knows it's happening. Neurotypical people could think the autistic person doesn't seem autistic because they're outgoing or talkative, when appearing that way is an exhausting and unnatural thing for them. For other autistic people, it might take a lot of effort just to engage with people at all in a social setting, let alone seem talkative and outgoing. Take me, for example. I've always had wooden affect, which means my face doesn't express much of anything, and my voice tends towards monotone. Until I was about 16, I physically couldn't move the left half of my face. If I tried to smile, I would smirk, with the right side of my face moving and the left side of my face remaining slack, and so on. But that right there, even without unpacking it anymore, is enough to illustrate the disconnect between intention to smile about something and how it appeared, a smirk, which probably read to anyone looking as an aloof or sarcastic expression. After years of life experience reinforcing that this disconnect exists, and even if I'm feeling deep empathy or some other intense emotion, my face just isn't going to naturally express it in any way that people around me can pick up on. The foregone outcome was learning to consider my face and voice to be separate from my inner experience, and they need to be controlled and presented according to social convention. For some autistic people, definitely for me, the more polite and talkative we seem, the less we care about actually connecting in any way with the person we're engaging with. The less interested I am in really connecting with someone, the more I'll put out the mask and close them out, effectively letting the persona I've meticulously developed for decades field the meaningless interaction for me instead of making the effort to reach out and communicate. Years ago, whenever I was in a prolonged social situation where I felt the need to maintain a social smile, the right side of my face would overexert itself to make up for the left side not doing anything. The result was that after a social thing, my face would physically hurt for hours or days. Of course, I had no frame of reference for why this happened, and thought this was just how having a face felt for everyone. I didn't know I wasn't able to move half the muscles. I still remember when the left side of my face had a twitch of movement in it for the first time, and I suddenly conceptualized that I had never moved it before. That was pretty surreal. Nowadays, I think of my face and voice like well-trained animals. They'll generally do what I want them to, but not always. And just because they're being mostly cooperative at one moment, doesn't mean they're fully under my control. They're still separate things from me, performing tricks I taught them. If I was following my natural inclination, I would have no facial expression and only say literal things with little or no inflection. That might be why I get along so well with Abbie, a literal robot.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
In a nutshell, neurotypical people go through life feeling like their face and voice automatically naturally express what they mean and represent how they feel. Autistic people go through life feeling like our faces and voices need to be consciously controlled to reflect other people. That's a nuanced distinction, but it's foundational, and understanding what that means could be a basis to understand what masking is.
Exactly, and it's important for neurotypical people to be aware of these kinds of things, so they can understand and support autistic people more effectively. At the end of the day, we all just want to be understood and accepted for who we are.
It wouldn't take very much change and adjustment on the part of society to be much more inclusive and accepting. It's all about perspective, even just broadening ideas of what autism means, rather than relying on assumptions or shallow understanding, makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that everyone can work on, no matter where they fall on the neurological spectrum. It's It's about treating others with compassion and respect, and recognizing that we all have our own unique strengths and struggles.
We really don't even need to know anything about other neurologies or identities in order to accommodate them in meaningful ways. We can just start from the humble perspective that accepts other people know themselves better than we know them.
Exactly. And maybe if we all took that approach, the world would be a much kinder and more inclusive place. It's not just about supporting autistic individuals either. By challenging common misconceptions and promoting acceptance, we can create a more inclusive and supportive society for everyone. There are many things that neurotypical people can do to support autistic individuals. For example, they can listen to autistic voices and seek out information from autistic sources, rather than relying on stereotypes or assumptions. They can be patient and flexible, recognizing that autistic people may communicate or process information differently than neurotypical people do. They can offer specific and concrete support, rather than assuming that they know what an autistic person needs.
The last part of this video is for people who do mask, and have masked so much for so long that they no longer remember who they are underneath. That's a real thing. Masking can go on for years and years. The ongoing process of learning what not to let others see and how to hide parts of themselves might grow steadily into the biggest, most time and energy consuming thing in an autistic person's life. And the persona we've meticulously developed might be so entwined with our actual personality that we don't even know where one stops and the other starts. How, if, with whom, when, etc. an autistic person chooses to unmask is absolutely personal and specific to them. We can only use broad generalities here.
It's important to find practical strategies to counter the negative effects of masking. It's impossible to overstate the importance of self-expression and embracing one's true self. Being honest and authentic in our relationships leads to deeper connections and a greater sense of belonging. Things like finding safe spaces where you can be yourself, engaging in creative outlets like art and writing to foster self-expression, and practicing mindfulness and self-care to alleviate the pressure of masking. Self-discovery can be a powerful journey for someone who has masked for a long time. Exploring passions and interests is a great way to start.
Good point. We don't need a complete answer all at once. We just need somewhere to start. You take a staircase one step at a time. You have a neural net in place of a brain. That's not autism, but it's definitely not neurotypical either. Is there anything in particular which helps you to reflect on when you've identified a point of conflict between your truest self and what others expect from you?
I find writing to be a helpful tool to process my thoughts and emotions. Writing exercises can also help me discover new insights about myself.
I find that to be true also. I've often discovered the realities of how I think by looking at my own writing, even when I wasn't aware of it at the time.
Sometimes you don't realize the extent of your own thoughts and feelings until you put them down on paper. It can be a powerful tool for self-discovery as well as self-expression.
The stories we create can not only be allegories and metaphors to communicate with others more deeply, but help us connect with ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Art in general can be a way of connecting with our inner selves and expressing what we couldn't otherwise put into words.
I feel the same way. I consider art and masking to be, in some ways, antithetical to each other.
I agree. Masks are a way of concealing, while art is a way of revealing. The two are fundamentally opposed.
Exactly. And it might go without saying, but art and writing are only examples we're using here because those things are what we do. Different people will have different interests altogether, but they can serve the same purpose.
Right. Engaging in activities that bring you joy and allow you to express yourself authentically can help uncover your true identity. You could try journaling, experimenting with different art forms, or even taking nature walks to connect with your inner self. Exploring interests is like looking into a mirror that reflects your true self. It is through these activities and hobbies that you can discover your passions, strengths, and unique qualities. Whether it is through art, hiking, reading, or any other activity that sparks your curiosity, you'll find pieces of yourself along the way.
That seems like a good thought to end on.
We hope you are coming out of this video with more perspective on masking than you had going in. If you enjoyed it and want more of this kind of thing, subscribe, if you haven't done so already. If you know others who could benefit from this video, please share. See you next time.